In the heart of a forgotten mansion, beneath layers of dust and secrets, a priceless heirloom disappears without a trace. But when a seasoned detective uncovers a hidden letter, everything you thought you knew is about to be turned upside down. Who stole the necklace? And why did the family hide the truth for centuries? The answer lies in a legacy no one dares reveal. Stay with us till the end to uncover the truth. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to never miss the next thrilling mystery. Chapter 1. The Invitation. The evening air in London was cool, and the faint hum of the city's bustle carried through the open window of Hercule Poirot's modest apartment. Yet for the famous Belgian detective, there was an air of stillness, a quiet that seemed to accompany the early hours of the night. He sat at his small, neatly arranged desk, surrounded by piles of books and papers, his mind a maze of cases past and those yet to be solved. A cup of tea sat untouched beside him, the steam rising gently in the dim light. Poirot's mind was a symphony of thoughts, each melody competing for attention. His elegant, meticulous mind, accustomed to unraveling the intricacies of human nature, was craving a challenge. Yet, as often was the case in his line of work, the silence of the moment was disturbed unexpectedly. The soft clink of glass on wood broke the tranquility. It was the arrival of a letter. Not just any letter, but an envelope of the finest quality, pale blue and embossed with gold trim. Poirot's fingers lingered on the envelope, studying it for a moment, his sharp eyes noting the lack of a return address. A letter? Without a name? Curious indeed. As if guided by an unseen hand, Poirot allowed his curiosity to win over his reason. He slowly opened the envelope, his precise movements revealing an invitation, a formal one, elegantly written in the flowing script of Lady Hawke herself, an aristocratic woman of considerable wealth and prestige. The words seemed to dance on the page. Monsieur Poirot, it is with great pleasure that I invite you to attend a most unique gathering at my estate this weekend. There has been an incident at the house, one that only your unparalleled skills could resolve. You shall find no ordinary puzzle here, but a mystery that has been waiting to be unraveled for generations. I trust you will arrive promptly. Please bring your most gifted mind, for you will need it. Yours sincerely, Lady Hawke. Poirot read the letter twice, his lips curling into a subtle smile. His mind, so often occupied with the weight of the cases he had solved, suddenly felt light. There was a peculiar allure to the invitation. The phrasing was simple, yet laced with something more, something elusive. The mention of a mystery, one waiting to be unraveled for generations, immediately drew Poirot in. It was a beckoning, a call to arms for his most trusted ally, his little gray cells. He placed the letter down carefully, but his mind was already racing. What sort of mystery could Lady Hawke have invited him to solve? A long-forgotten treasure? A lost heirloom? A family secret? His instinct told him it was not so simple. There was more hidden behind the polished surface of that invitation. The detective stood up and walked to the window. From his vantage point, he could see the lanterns lining the streets of London, casting soft golden pools of light against the cool, dark stone. The world outside seemed untouched by the quiet storm brewing in the confines of Poirot's mind. He adjusted his bow tie, a rare moment of self-indulgence in his otherwise methodical life. Ah, but it is never just a case, is it? He murmured to himself, his voice as soft as a whisper, yet filled with the weight of certainty. No, no, this is something far deeper, something personal. With a final glance at the letter, Poirot took a moment to consider. His old friend, Captain Hastings, had long since retired from the detective's side, yet Poirot felt no loneliness in his work. His mind was the only companion he needed, and his methodical mind, like a clock ticking its way through each piece of the puzzle, never faltered. He was content for the moment with his solitary routine. But now there was a new challenge, a new adventure beckoning from the shadows. And so, with his signature sense of calm, Poirot decided he would go. The next morning, Poirot dressed with his usual precision, donning a perfectly tailored suit and his black patent leather shoes, which clicked sharply on the floor as he moved. He was ready for whatever awaited him at Lady Hawke's estate. As he finished fastening his cufflinks, a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. To solve the mystery of the missing emeralds, perhaps, he mused aloud, the idea taking shape as his thoughts coalesced. A carriage awaited him at the door. The journey to Lady Hawke's estate was long, but Poirot did not mind the solitude. The rhythmic clopping of the horses' hooves against the cobbled streets was oddly soothing, and Poirot allowed himself to relax, his thoughts drifting from the present to the possibilities of the coming evening. As the carriage approached the imposing gates of the Hawke estate, Poirot noticed the grandeur of the place. It stood at the edge of London, a sprawling mansion surrounded by elegant gardens, the grandeur of its architecture speaking to centuries of wealth and history. Yet as the gates opened before him, something felt off. The shadows seemed deeper here, even at this time of day. It was not just the estate's size, nor its historical significance. No, there was an unspoken tension in the air, as though the very walls of the house held secrets, dark secrets that had yet to be unearthed. With a soft sigh, Poirot stepped from the carriage, his shoes clicking sharply against the gravel as he made his way toward the entrance of the house. The door swung open before he could knock, and there stood Lady Hawke herself, her face framed in the soft glow of the chandelier inside. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," she greeted him, her voice smooth and polished, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a glint of something hidden beneath the surface, something that only Poirot's trained eye could catch. "Mon cher, you are most welcome," Lady Hawke said, her smile both warm and faintly strained. "Please, come inside. The mystery is waiting." Poirot stepped inside, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The atmosphere inside the mansion was thick with a quiet unease, and Poirot could feel the weight of it as soon as he entered. The smell of aged wood, polished silver, and fine perfumes filled the air. Yet despite the beauty of the surroundings, Poirot could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. As Lady Hawke led him through the winding corridors of the estate, Poirot's mind worked quickly, his eyes scanning each detail, each shadow. A house full of history, a family with secrets, and now a mystery that needed unraveling. But what was hidden behind that polished smile of Lady Hawke's? And why did Poirot feel as though this invitation was more than just a request for his services? The game had begun, and as Poirot always said, the little gray cells will reveal all in time. Chapter 2. A glittering gathering. The grand estate of Lord and Lady Hawke was a sight to behold. Its towering spires and elegant stonework seemed to rise like sentinels against the evening sky, a reminder of centuries of wealth, history, and power. As Poirot approached the front steps, he was greeted by the soft glow of gas lamps lining the entrance, their flickering flames casting gentle shadows across the immaculately kept grounds. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if the estate itself was holding its breath, awaiting the unfolding of a new chapter in its storied past. Poirot had arrived early, as was his habit, and the evening was still young. The hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses began to echo softly through the halls as he entered the grand foyer. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floors with a deliberate rhythm, each step a quiet declaration of his presence. He straightened his bow tie with a flourish, his ever-present air of composure and precision intact. Though the mansion was filled with voices, Poirot's attention was singular and focused, his mind already at work, cataloging the smallest of details, the smallest of clues. The room was an impressive display of opulence, rich velvet curtains framing the grand windows, while crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a soft glow over the guests below. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and the murmurs of aristocratic conversations. The men wore black suits with gold cufflinks, their faces stern but with eyes that glinted in the light, while the women, draped in glittering gowns of silks and satins, laughed softly, their voices like the delicate sound of tinkling glass. Poirot's sharp eyes took in every nuance, every movement. His gaze lingered on the individuals who seemed to stand out from the rest. Lady Hawke, resplendent in her sapphire blue gown, stood near the grand fireplace, her radiant beauty drawing the attention of nearly every guest. Her presence was captivating, but it was not the kind of attention that Poirot sought. He preferred to observe the subtle movements, the whispers at the edges of the crowd, the slight tightening of a jaw, the fleeting glance that meant more than words ever could. He watched as Lady Hawke moved through the crowd, her laughter light but calculated, as if each word and gesture was meticulously crafted to fit the moment. Yet despite her poise, Poirot could see the faintest flicker of something. Was it anxiety? Concern? It was gone as quickly as it appeared, and soon Lady Hawke caught sight of him. She moved toward him with an elegance that matched the flowing fabric of her gown. "Mon cher Poirot," she greeted, her voice smooth and honeyed, yet with an undertone of something more, something secret. "How delightful you could join us this evening." Poirot bowed politely, his hands folded in front of him in his signature manner. "Madame, it is an honor to be invited to your beautiful home," he replied, his voice soft yet firm. He could feel her gaze on him, assessing him, as though she were measuring him for something far more important than mere conversation. "It is no trouble at all," Lady Hawke continued, offering him a glass of champagne. "But there is something that requires your attention, something that cannot wait much longer." Poirot raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her words. "Ah, madame, I sense there is a mystery waiting for me behind the veil of this magnificent gathering." Lady Hawke's smile never faltered, but Poirot saw her eyes shift slightly, as though she were searching for the right words to say. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, there is, but not just any mystery, one that is tied to the very heart of this family." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "The emerald necklace, as you have no doubt already been informed, has disappeared." Poirot's expression remained neutral, though inwardly his mind began to work in quiet overdrive. The necklace, a family heirloom of great value, had been entrusted to Lady Hawke's care, its history as rich as the jewels that adorned it. There was something about the way she spoke of it, however, that struck Poirot as peculiar. Was she truly concerned, or was there something more to her distress? "May I ask, madame," Poirot began, his voice soothing yet purposeful, "why you have invited me here this evening? Surely you do not require my assistance for such a simple matter as the disappearance of a necklace. There is more to this story, n'est-ce pas?" Lady Hawke's eyes flickered, a momentary tension in the air between them. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the sound of footsteps interrupted them. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, approached, Lord Hawke himself, the patriarch of the family. "My dear Poirot," Lord Hawke boomed, extending his hand with a hearty laugh, his voice like a deep rolling thunder. "I trust Lady Hawke has been treating you well? We are so pleased to have you with us." Poirot took his hand, his grip firm yet measured. "Your hospitality is most generous, mon cher. I am honored to be in your company." Lord Hawke's gaze swept across the room, his eyes gleaming with something less than genuine warmth. "A most curious situation, Poirot," he said, his tone shifting. "A treasure of such value, disappearing without a trace. We are certain it will be found soon, but until then, I am sure Lady Hawke has filled you in on the details." "Indeed," Poirot replied, his eyes briefly flicking to Lady Hawke, "but I sense there is more that remains hidden from plain sight. It is in these shadows where the truth often hides." Lady Hawke's smile faltered for the briefest of moments before she regained her composure. "You are right, Monsieur Poirot. There is always more to a mystery than meets the eye." The conversation shifted as Lord and Lady Hawke moved on to greet other guests, leaving Poirot to contemplate their words. He could feel it now, an undercurrent of tension running through the estate. The laughter of the guests seemed slightly hollow, the glint of the chandeliers slightly dimmer. The atmosphere, so carefully crafted to be one of celebration, was infused with a subtle but undeniable sense of unease. Poirot's eyes drifted over the gathering once more, his sharp mind observing every detail. The guests, all wealthy and influential, were now engaged in polite conversation, but there was an air of nervous energy about them. A young woman, her dark eyes darting nervously from one guest to another, caught Poirot's gaze. Isabel, the daughter of Lady and Lord Hawke, was standing alone, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her face unreadable. And then there was the butler, Charles, standing near the far corner, his eyes never straying far from the door. He had been with the Hawke family for decades, but his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the wine glasses on the silver tray. Poirot's mind was already piecing the puzzle together. This was no simple theft. There was something far deeper at play, something hidden beneath the gilded surface of this family's wealth and prestige. As the night wore on, Poirot's mind danced between the guests, the clues, and the subtle signs that had already begun to unfold. Every gesture, every glance, every hidden whisper was a part of the grand design that would eventually reveal the truth. But for now, the mystery of the missing emerald necklace remained just that, an enigma wrapped in the finest silks, waiting to be uncovered. And Poirot, with his little gray cells in overdrive, would be the one to unravel it. Chapter 3. The necklace vanishes. The night had deepened, and the shadows in the grand Hawke estate grew longer, stretching like silent specters across the hallways. Poirot had barely finished his drink when Lady Hawke approached him once again, her face taut with concern. There was no longer the lightness that had accompanied her earlier. Instead, a palpable unease had settled into her eyes, a flicker of fear dancing beneath the surface of her perfectly composed demeanor. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice soft yet edged with urgency. "You must come with me at once. It is gone." Poirot's keen eyes immediately detected the tremor in her words, the slight falter as she spoke. His heart, too, quickened, not out of fear, but out of the recognition that he was being drawn deeper into something far more intricate than he had first imagined. He followed her silently, his mind already sifting through the possibilities, weighing them with the calm precision that had become second nature to him. Lady Hawke led him down the winding corridors of the estate, her footsteps echoing softly in the silence. As they neared the study, Poirot's gaze flickered briefly to the portraits that lined the walls, their solemn expressions seeming to watch him as he passed. There was something unsettling about the way the eyes of the painted ancestors followed him, their gazes unblinking, as though they knew of the secrets buried within this house. They arrived at the study, a room that had once been a sanctuary for generations of Hawkes, now transformed into a stage for their deepest troubles. Lady Hawke opened the door, her movements swift yet strained, and Poirot stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by the flickering flames of a small fire in the hearth. A tall wooden cabinet stood against one wall, its glass doors now open, but the most glaring detail was the absence of the emerald necklace that should have been there, resting atop the velvet cushion within the display case. Poirot's eyes scanned the room meticulously. The atmosphere was heavy, as though the very air was thick with the weight of what had occurred. Lady Hawke stood near the cabinet, her hand trembling slightly as she pointed to the empty space where the necklace had once been. "Someone must have taken it, Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice quivering with distress. "It was here just hours ago, when we last checked. I cannot understand it. The room was locked, the windows bolted shut. How could this happen?" Poirot stepped forward, his presence calm and steady. His eyes moved over the study with calculated precision, taking in every detail: the furniture, the subtle signs of disturbance, and the oddness of the entire situation. The room, so grand and yet now so tainted with tension, was eerily still. "Tell me, madame," Poirot asked, his voice soothing but filled with purpose. "Who was the last to enter this room? Who had access to the necklace?" Lady Hawke hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the door, as if she were weighing the implications of her words. "Only Charles, the butler, and Isabel, my daughter. They were both here earlier in the day when I last checked the case." Poirot's sharp mind immediately began to consider the implications. The butler, Charles, a loyal servant to the Hawke family for many years, seemed unlikely to be involved in such a brazen act of theft. And Isabel? Well, she was another matter. The young woman had seemed so distant and aloof during the evening's gathering, but could she be the one to have taken the necklace? Poirot's gaze flicked to Lady Hawke, who stood wringing her hands, her face drawn tight with worry. "Madame," he said, his tone now more direct, "I must ask you to remain calm. The key to this mystery lies within these walls. I will not let the truth remain hidden for long. He turned back to the case, his eyes narrowing as he studied the space where the necklace had been. There was no sign of forced entry. The lock on the cabinet was intact, and the glass doors were undisturbed. In fact, the only clue Poirot could find was a faint smear of something green, on the edge of the cabinet, just below the velvet cushion. He crouched down to examine it more closely. The smear was small, almost imperceptible, but there it was, emerald dust. It was as though someone had touched the necklace, perhaps too hastily, leaving behind a faint trace of the precious gem. Poirot's heart quickened with realization. It seems that the thief was not as careful as they believed, he murmured, more to himself than to Lady Hawke. His mind raced, analyzing the possibilities. Someone had taken the necklace, yes, but they had been in a rush, leaving behind a trace, a mistake, one that would prove their undoing. Lady Hawke, standing silently at his side, seemed oblivious to the significance of the clue. "What do we do now, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice shaky. Poirot straightened and turned to face her, his expression steady but thoughtful. "Now, madame, we shall retrace the steps of the evening, piece by piece. We will speak to those who were here and observe closely. The necklace may have vanished, but the truth remains, hidden in plain sight." He stood for a moment, allowing the weight of the words to settle. Poirot's mind was already at work, unraveling the threads of this mystery, sifting through the small details that would reveal the truth. The emerald dust was not just a clue. It was a message, a sign left behind by someone who had not fully understood the danger of their actions. Lady Hawke seemed to lose herself in thought, but Poirot was no longer paying attention to her. His gaze moved slowly over the room once more, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Everything about this case, from the locked room to the faint trace of emerald dust, pointed to a thief who had believed they could escape unnoticed. But no one could escape Poirot's attention, not when his little gray cells were working at full capacity. As Poirot turned to leave the study, Lady Hawke's voice called after him, her tone tinged with something darker now, something more desperate. "Do you think you will find it, Poirot? Will you be able to return it?" Poirot paused, his back to her, his voice calm but unwavering. "Madame, I do not merely seek to find the necklace. I seek to uncover the truth of who took it, and why." And with that, he stepped out into the hallway, the door closing softly behind him. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, its hands moving ever forward. But for Poirot, time was a tool, not a constraint. He would find the answers. He always did. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place, and in the silence of the Hawke estate, the mystery of the vanishing necklace deepened, awaiting its final revelation. Chapter 4. The Guests Under Suspicion. The air in the Hawke estate had thickened, the grand evening now overshadowed by the tension that hung between the walls like a dense fog. Poirot, ever the keen observer, could feel it in his bones. The subtle shifts in demeanor, the quick glances exchanged when no one thought he was watching. The mystery of the missing emerald necklace had already begun to reveal its intricacies, each thread leading him deeper into the labyrinth of secrets that seemed to twist beneath the polished surface of the Hawke family. After his visit to the study, Poirot had excused himself from Lady Hawke's company. He needed time, not just to inspect the scene of the crime further, but to consider the very people involved. The family, the staff. Each one of them had a story to tell, and it was now up to Poirot to sift through the layers of their words, their actions, and their motivations. As he walked slowly down the hall, his sharp eyes noting the smallest details, the way the paintings on the walls seemed to glimmer in the candlelight, the way the guests lingered in quiet huddles of conversation. Poirot could not shake the feeling that the truth was closer than ever. But first, he needed to engage with the very people who, it seemed, were hiding it. Lord Hawke Poirot's first stop was Lord Hawke, the head of the household, who had been notably silent since the necklace's disappearance. Lord Hawke was an imposing figure, a man whose years of power and wealth had given him an air of confidence, one that could easily cross over into arrogance if one was not careful. Yet there was something about his demeanor now that struck Poirot as unusual. Something subtle in the way he stood, his back just slightly too stiff, his jaw set with an air of restrained discomfort. Poirot approached the large study where Lord Hawke was seated behind a grand desk, his hands folded before him, eyes fixed on a stack of papers. He looked up as Poirot entered, offering a quick, forced smile. "Ah, Poirot," Lord Hawke said, his voice rich, but with a hint of something distant, almost evasive. "I trust you found the case to your liking? We are all very concerned, of course, but I'm certain it will be resolved soon." Poirot took his time before responding, his hands clasped in front of him as he considered his words carefully. "Monsieur Hawke, I do not come here to seek the obvious answers. I seek the truth that often hides beneath the surface. Tell me, has the necklace ever been more than just a symbol of wealth and status for you? Could it have held a deeper meaning, perhaps a secret, one that has been lost to time?" Lord Hawke's eyes flickered, but only for the briefest moment. He leaned back in his chair, trying to regain composure. "A family heirloom, Poirot. Nothing more, nothing less. It's part of our legacy, of course, but its value, in truth, is in its history. It means very little to me beyond that." Poirot nodded, but his mind was already racing. Lord Hawke's words rang true, but the subtle shift in his eyes, the brief hesitation, had not escaped Poirot. A man who spoke so readily of wealth and status without hesitation was usually hiding something deeper. Poirot, however, chose not to press him further just yet. He would revisit this later. Lady Hawke, poised as ever, was the next on Poirot's list. Her grace was almost too perfect, too calculated, as though every gesture, every word was rehearsed. But beneath her practiced exterior, Poirot could sense a flicker of something, a disturbance in her usually calm demeanor. Could it be fear, guilt, or perhaps something else entirely? As he approached her in the grand sitting room, where she was seated with a small group of guests, Poirot noticed how her eyes darted nervously to the window, and her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her dress as he drew closer. "Lady Hawke," Poirot greeted her with his usual charm, bowing ever so slightly. "I trust you are holding up well under the circumstances. The mystery, of course, is an unfortunate one." Her smile was warm but strained. "Monsieur Poirot, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you're here. I only want the necklace returned to us. This is all so very distressing." "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her. "But I must ask, madame, what is it about the necklace that has caused such distress in your home? Could it be that there is more to its disappearance than meets the eye?" Lady Hawke's gaze faltered for a split second, before she straightened, her composure returning like a mask slipping back into place. There is no mystery, Monsieur Poirot, only the theft of a family heirloom. I trust you will solve it swiftly. Her words were calm, but there was something in her voice that hinted at a deeper concern. Poirot sensed that she knew more than she was letting on. She had seen something, or perhaps she was hiding something about the necklace that even her husband was unaware of. Isabelle Hawke. Next, Poirot turned his attention to Isabelle, Lady and Lord Hawke's daughter. The young woman had been the most elusive of the evening, and her behavior during the dinner had been odd, distant, almost as if she was trying to disappear into the background of the room. Yet Poirot couldn't help but notice that her eyes had followed every conversation, every movement, with a certain intensity. Was it curiosity or something darker? He found Isabelle in the library, where she was quietly thumbing through a book, her posture stiff and her expression unreadable. When she saw Poirot enter, she set the book down quickly, her eyes meeting his for the first time. "Ah, Miss Hawke," Poirot began, his tone soft yet probing. "I hope the evening has not been too trying for you. The events have certainly cast a shadow over what should have been a joyous occasion." Isabelle's lips parted to speak, but for a long moment, no words came. She seemed to be measuring him, her mind working behind those cool, dark eyes. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm, but her words weighed with an undercurrent of something more. "I don't know what happened, Monsieur Poirot. The necklace, it's gone, and none of us can understand how. We've all been under such pressure, but She stopped herself, eyes flickering away. Poirot leaned in slightly, his gaze gentle but insistent. "You were the last to see the necklace, were you not? Before it vanished?" Isabelle's expression remained inscrutable, but the briefest flash of discomfort crossed her face. I was," she admitted, her voice low. "But I didn't take it, Monsieur Poirot. I swear." Poirot nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I believe you, Miss Hawke, but sometimes even the innocent can be caught in a web they do not fully understand." As he turned to leave, Poirot could feel the lingering weight of her gaze on his back, a mixture of guilt and uncertainty that had yet to reveal its full story. The staff Poirot's final examination would be of the staff. Among them, Charles, the butler, had stood out in his silent observance during the evening. His every movement was precise, and yet, as Poirot had noticed earlier, there was a nervous edge to him, a subtle tightness in his shoulders whenever he interacted with the guests. Poirot found him in the kitchen, washing glasses with a methodical focus that betrayed an unease he could not mask. "Monsieur Charles," Poirot said as he approached, "I trust you are well this evening? There has been a great deal of confusion in the house. A theft, in fact. A most valuable necklace has vanished." Charles glanced up, his eyes wide for a split second before he quickly returned to his task, his hands moving faster now, almost too quickly. I know nothing of it, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice more tremulous than he intended. I was in the kitchen all evening." Poirot watched him for a moment, noting the way the butler's hands trembled just slightly as he dried the glass. "You did not enter the study at all, then? Not once?" Charles paused, the glass still in his hands, as if considering his response. "No, monsieur. I was busy with the guests. That is all." Poirot said nothing, but his mind was working furiously. The butler's response was too quick, too rehearsed. He wasn't lying, but something in his tone, in the tightness of his movements, suggested that Charles knew more than he was letting on. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but Poirot knew that this was only the beginning. Everyone had a motive, but who among them had the will to steal the necklace? As he moved through the estate, his mind weighed the clues, his little gray cells already spinning the threads into a tapestry that would soon reveal the truth. The game was far from over, and Poirot was certain that the answer was closer than ever. Chapter 5. The Hidden Room. The evening had deepened into an almost palpable silence, a stillness that hung over the Hawke estate like a thick, suffocating fog. Poirot had spent the last few hours carefully piecing together fragments of the mystery, the smallest details that could crack the case wide open. Yet despite all the conversations, the careful observations, and the subtle hints that had surfaced, there was still one thing that unsettled him: the feeling that something was being concealed, hidden just beneath the surface of the Hawke family's impeccable facade. The necklace, of course, was gone, but so was the trust between the people who lived in this house. And with every passing hour, Poirot's sense of unease grew. He had spoken to each of the guests, the staff, the family members, and yet something wasn't right. There was a sense that the estate itself, with its towering walls and intricate corridors, was hiding something far more important than just a stolen piece of jewelry. After a quiet dinner, Poirot had excused himself from the gathering. His mind was still turning, working through the puzzle, finding connections where none had seemed to exist. He couldn't shake the feeling that the key to solving the mystery lay somewhere within the estate, somewhere hidden from view. His eyes, sharp and calculating, had already begun to scan the rooms, searching for that one elusive detail that would reveal the truth. The study Poirot's first stop was the study again. He had already inspected it once, closely, but something told him he needed to return, to revisit the place where the necklace had vanished. The room, though grand and filled with the weight of generations of Hawke history, felt cold to him now. The grand wooden desk, the large leather-bound books lining the shelves, it all seemed to mock him, as if the answers were right there, staring him in the face. Lady Hawke had shown him where the necklace had been displayed, and he had noted the absence of any signs of forced entry. The glass case had not been shattered, nor had the lock been tampered with. Yet Poirot's mind kept returning to the same thought. The thief had not been careful enough. The emerald dust, so faint yet so telling, was the only sign left behind. Poirot circled the room slowly, his steps measured and deliberate. His eyes scanned the corners, the shadows, and the furnishings. It was then that something caught his eye, something subtle, almost imperceptible, a small, almost invisible crack in the wall behind the bookcase. It was so faint, in fact, that it could easily have gone unnoticed. Poirot approached the wall, his hand hovering just inches above the crack. He placed his fingers lightly against it, testing the surface. The crack, though barely visible, felt different. There was a hollow sound to it, a sound that could only mean one thing: a hidden space behind the wall. The hidden room. Poirot's heart quickened slightly as he pressed gently against the crack. The wall, to his surprise, shifted with the slightest push. It was a door, a secret passageway. The hidden room he had suspected existed all along, tucked away from the prying eyes of the household. With a quiet breath, Poirot stepped into the room. The space was small, dark, and musty with age, but it was precisely the kind of place that someone would choose to hide something, or perhaps to hide from something. The faint scent of dust and old wood filled the air, and as Poirot's eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw the faint outlines of furniture, an old desk, a chair, and shelves lined with forgotten books. But it wasn't the room itself that intrigued Poirot. It was what lay within it. At the center of the room, under a heavy cloth, he discovered an old wooden chest, its surface worn with age. Poirot's fingers hovered over it for a moment before he lifted the lid with a creak. Inside the chest was a collection of old papers, letters, and documents, most of them yellowed with time. And among the papers, there was something else, a small velvet pouch. Poirot's heart beat a little faster. He reached into the pouch and pulled out a gleaming object, the emerald necklace. The revelation. For a moment, Poirot simply stood there, the necklace resting in his hands. He examined it closely, his sharp eyes catching every detail of the craftsmanship, the flawless emerald at its center, the delicate chain of gold. It was beautiful, yes, but there was something far more important about it. The necklace was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of the Hawke family's power, their wealth, their legacy. And it was the very thing that had set the stage for all the drama unfolding around him. As Poirot stood there, the weight of the necklace in his hands, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The missing necklace hadn't been stolen in a moment of passion or greed. No, the necklace had been hidden away intentionally by someone who knew exactly what it meant and who knew how to keep it hidden from prying eyes. But who had hidden it, and why? Poirot's mind worked furiously, piecing together the clues that had been left in plain sight. The cracked wall, the secret room, it was all coming together. The person responsible for the disappearance had wanted the necklace to be found, but only by someone with the right skills, someone who could uncover its hidden location. Someone like Poirot. The shadows of the past. As Poirot examined the contents of the chest further, he found a series of letters written in a delicate hand, their ink faded but legible. The letters spoke of betrayal, of secrets buried deep within the Hawke family, and of a lost heirloom that had been hidden away to protect it from falling into the wrong hands. The letters mentioned a woman, someone who had been close to the Hawke family, a relative perhaps, or a trusted confidant. She had known the truth about the necklace, about its power, and about the dark secrets it contained. But she had disappeared years ago, and with her disappearance, the secrets had been buried, forgotten by all but a few. Poirot's heart quickened as he read the last letter. It was addressed to Lady Hawke, and it spoke of the necklace's true origins, of how it had been stolen from a foreign noble family during a time of great political upheaval. The necklace, it seemed, was far more valuable than anyone had realized. It was a key to a long-forgotten family treasure, hidden away for generations. And Lady Hawke? She was the last person alive who knew the full story. The woman who had hidden the necklace to protect it from falling into the wrong hands. The return to the house. With the necklace now in his hands, Poirot turned to leave the hidden room. He had uncovered the truth, but the mystery was far from over. The necklace had been taken, yes, But by whom and why? The answers were still elusive, though they were now within reach. As Poirot closed the door behind him, he felt a surge of satisfaction. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the final picture was still incomplete. There was one last step, one last conversation that needed to happen, one last person who needed to confess. With the necklace safely tucked away in his pocket, Poirot made his way back to the grand hall, his mind turning over the final details of the case. The mystery was coming to an end, but not without a final dramatic revelation. And Poirot, as always, would be the one to uncover it. As he approached the gathering room, the final clue hung in the air, ready to reveal itself. It was only a matter of time before the truth would come to light. Chapter 6. The Disguised Identity. The stillness of the night seemed to stretch endlessly, like a shadow creeping across the sprawling Hawke estate. Inside the mansion, the guests had begun to disperse to their rooms, each one weighed down by the tension of the evening. Yet for Hercule Poirot, the mystery of the missing emerald necklace had only deepened, and the unraveling threads of deception seemed to grow more tangled with each passing hour. Poirot had returned to his room earlier, but his mind had not allowed him the peace of sleep. The emerald necklace, still hidden in his possession, weighed heavily in his pocket, as though it were a key to unlocking the final chapter of the case. Yet as he sat at his small desk in the quiet solitude of his room, a single thought gnawed at him. There was more to this case, more than just a stolen necklace, more than just a family heirloom. There was an identity to be uncovered, a secret disguised by years of silence and falsehoods. The letter Poirot had already discovered the hidden room, the letters, and the necklace itself. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but there was still something elusive, something crucial missing from the story. He had found clues of betrayal, of a lost relative, but the true motivations remained clouded. Who would risk everything for a necklace? Who had the means, the desire, and the secrecy to hide the truth so well? His fingers brushed over the letters once more, and there, amidst the carefully penned words of betrayal and power, one letter caught his eye. It was not signed, nor was it addressed to anyone in particular. It was brief and direct, the ink slightly smudged, as though written in haste. The letter's content was as follows: "The necklace must remain hidden at all costs. The truth must never be revealed. Not now, not ever. The secret is too great, and the cost of exposing it would destroy everything." The words echoed in Poirot's mind. What secret could be so great? Who would go to such lengths to protect it? A conversation with Isabelle Poirot had no intention of letting the case slip away so easily. As the hours passed, his mind sifted through each of the guests, considering their possible involvement, and one name lingered more than the rest: Isabelle Hawke. Her quiet demeanor, her nervous gestures, and the subtle unease she had displayed throughout the evening all pointed to her as a possible key to unlocking the final pieces of the puzzle. It was not just her proximity to the necklace, nor her unusual behavior during the dinner. It was the fact that Isabelle seemed to be playing a role. Her aloofness was a mask, and Poirot was certain that beneath it, something far darker lingered. With this in mind, Poirot decided it was time to speak with Isabelle directly. She had been elusive, but he knew better than anyone that the smallest of conversations could reveal the greatest truths. As he entered the drawing room, Isabelle was Seated by the fire, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of her wineglass. Her eyes flickered to him as he approached, and she straightened slightly, though the tension in her posture remained. "Miss Hawke," Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm. "I hope I am not disturbing you, but there is a matter that requires your attention. I must ask you about the necklace once again." "You were one of the last to see it, were you not?" Isabel did not answer immediately. Instead, she stared into the flickering flames, her mind clearly elsewhere. Poirot waited, his gaze soft but probing. "You are correct, Monsieur Poirot," Isabel finally said, her voice steady, though there was a hesitation that lingered in her tone. "I did see it, but I did not take it. I swear it." Poirot nodded, but his eyes never left her face. "I do not doubt your words, Miss Hawke, but I must ask, why do you seem so evasive? You were in the study that night, weren't you? And you were the last to leave the room. Is there something you are not telling me?" For a brief moment, Isabel's face flickered with something Poirot could not quite place. A mixture of fear and defiance. She straightened in her seat, as if preparing to say something, but before the words could form, she faltered. It was then that Poirot noticed something buried beneath her calm exterior. I am not who you think I am," Isabel whispered, the confession barely audible. "The necklace. It's not just a family heirloom. It's tied to something far darker. Something I—" At that very moment, the door creaked open, and Charles, the butler, stepped into the room, his face a mask of concern. "Miss Hawke, Monsieur Poirot," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "there is something you must see." The revelation. Poirot's eyes flicked to Isabel, who seemed to pale at the interruption. Her confession was unfinished, her words left hanging in the air. But Poirot knew that whatever had been left unsaid was crucial to the mystery. He glanced at Charles and nodded, silently urging him to continue. Charles led them down the hall, his steps quick, almost hurried. The tension in the air had shifted, and Poirot could sense that something had changed. Something had been triggered by their conversation. When they arrived at the study, Charles pushed open the door and stepped aside. Poirot's eyes scanned the room immediately. There, in the center of the floor, was a newly discovered detail, a freshly moved piece of furniture, revealing a hidden trapdoor in the floorboards. "The secret room," Charles whispered, his voice trembling. "It leads to a place that none of us knew existed." Poirot crouched down, his sharp eyes scanning the edges of the trapdoor. There, buried beneath the floor, was another world, hidden away for decades, perhaps centuries. The trapdoor creaked open easily under Poirot's touch, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. With a knowing glance at Isabel, Poirot descended first, his movements precise. Isabel hesitated, but followed closely behind. The air grew colder as they descended, and soon the faint light of the study above faded into darkness. At the bottom of the stairs, Poirot's flashlight illuminated a small, musty room, an archive of sorts, filled with boxes, old trunks, and weathered documents. It was then that Poirot saw it, an old, ornate chest covered in dust and cobwebs. The chest, though weathered, was unmistakably ancient, and as Poirot stepped forward to open it, he knew that this was where the real secret of the Hawke family lay hidden. Inside the chest were stacks of old letters, some of which were sealed with wax. And there, nestled among the papers, was a portrait of a woman, a woman Poirot instantly recognized. She was younger, her features sharp and elegant, but it was the name written on the back of the portrait that caught his eye. Lady Evelyn Hawke, Poirot read aloud, his voice low with the weight of the revelation. The missing relative, the woman who disappeared. Isabel's face paled as the truth unfolded before her. She had been hiding the necklace, but it was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of a secret buried deep within her family's past. The hidden identity Poirot turned to Isabel, his gaze steady but filled with understanding. Miss Hawke, you are not simply protecting an heirloom. You are protecting a legacy, one that has been hidden for years. Lady Evelyn Hawke, your great aunt, had discovered the truth about the necklace and its origins. She had uncovered a treasure hidden by your ancestors, and she had planned to reveal it to the world. But someone within your family, did not want that truth to be known. Isabel swallowed hard, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I didn't want to believe it. But Lady Evelyn, she was my mother's sister. She vanished years ago, and we were told she had run off with a lover. But the truth was far darker. The necklace, it's a map, a key to finding something far more valuable than gold or jewels. Poirot nodded, the pieces of the mystery now falling into place. The necklace was not just an heirloom. It was a key to a hidden treasure, one that had been kept secret for generations. And now, Isabel was the last one standing, tasked with protecting it. Who wanted the truth buried, Isabel? Poirot asked gently. Who would go to such lengths to hide it? Isabel looked at him, her eyes filled with fear and resolve. I believe it was my father. He has been hiding the truth for years. But I never wanted to be part of this. I never wanted the secret. Poirot stepped back, his mind whirring with the final pieces of the puzzle. The truth, at last, was within reach. But it would be up to Isabel to decide what to do with it. The mystery was nearly over, but the real question now was, would Isabel reveal the truth, or would she continue to protect the hidden identity that had haunted her family for so long? The final chapter was yet to be written. Chapter 7. A Web of Lies. The night stretched on, and the heavy silence that had settled over the Hawke estate seemed to press closer with every passing hour. Poirot stood in the dimly lit study, the secret chest now closed behind him, its contents a hidden chapter of the Hawke family's past. Isabel Hawke stood at the center of the room, her hands tightly clasped, her face pale, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resolve. For the first time in this case, Poirot could feel the weight of the decision that hung over Isabel, her burden so much more than just the loss of the necklace. It was as though she had been carrying a secret, not only of theft, but of betrayal. Betrayal at the hands of those closest to her. Her family, the people she had trusted most, had woven a web of lies that had entrapped them all. Poirot's eyes softened as he observed her, understanding her struggle. She had been a pawn in a game that was much bigger than her. But now, with the truth on the cusp of revelation, she could no longer remain silent. Miss Hawke, Poirot said gently, his voice calm but filled with purpose. I know you have been protecting something far greater than the necklace. But the time has come to reveal what lies beneath the surface. There is no escaping the truth, and the web of lies that has been spun will only continue to ensnare you. Isabel closed her eyes for a moment, as though steeling herself against the weight of his words. I didn't want to believe it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I think I've known for a long time. My father. He's been hiding the truth, protecting the family from a secret that could destroy everything. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze steady and unwavering. What secret, Isabel? What is it that your father has kept hidden for all these years? And why does the necklace, your family's most prized possession, hold such a dark secret? Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, as though the words themselves were difficult to admit. The necklace, it's not just a family heirloom. It was the key to a treasure that my father and Lady Eveline, my mother's sister, had discovered years ago. But Lady Eveline wanted to reveal it to the world. She had uncovered something far more valuable than anything our family could imagine. A treasure hidden beneath the estate, a legacy that could change everything. Poirot nodded slowly, piecing the story together in his mind. He could see the fear in Isabel's eyes, the fear that had plagued her every decision. She had been caught in the web of her family's lies, lies spun by a man who would stop at nothing to protect a secret that he believed was too dangerous to be revealed. And what did your father do when Lady Eveline tried to reveal the truth? Poirot asked, his voice soft but probing. Isabel looked away, as if the very thought of it was unbearable. He did what he had to. He had her disappear. He made sure no one would ever find out what she knew. And when the necklace disappeared, he thought it was over. But the truth is always harder to bury than one thinks. Poirot's mind was racing now. Lady Eveline had discovered the treasure hidden beneath the estate, a treasure that had been lost for centuries. But what could it be? And why had Lady Eveline's disappearance been so conveniently swept under the rug? These were questions that now burned in Poirot's mind, questions that would lead him to the final confrontation with the truth. A confrontation with Lord Hawke. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound, the faintest creak of the door. He turned to see Lord Hawke standing in the doorway, his large frame silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. His face, though calm, was tight with tension. The game, Poirot could tell, was nearing its end. Poirot! Lord Hawke's voice rang out, smooth and calculated. I must speak with you. There are things that have been left unsaid. The past cannot remain hidden forever. Poirot's eyes never left Lord Hawke's face. The man was well practiced in the art of concealment, but Poirot could see the cracks beginning to form in his mask. The truth, Poirot was certain, was just behind those cracks, waiting to break free. Lord Hawke, Poirot began, his voice cool and deliberate. You have been hiding the truth for a long time. The necklace, Lady Eveline's disappearance, the treasure beneath this very estate. It all ties together. You have been weaving a web of lies, but I think it's time for you to cut it loose. Lord Hawke stepped into the room, his eyes narrowing slightly. You have no idea what you are dealing with, Poirot. This family, this estate, it is not just about wealth. It's about power. Power that has been passed down through the generations. And that power must be protected at all costs. Poirot took a step closer, his presence commanding yet calm. Power, Lord Hawke? Is that what this is about? Power? Or is it fear? Fear of what would happen if the truth came to light. Fear of what Lady Eveline might have uncovered. and what you have kept hidden for all these years. Lord Hawke's expression darkened. You don't understand, Poirot. You think this is about the necklace? About some treasure that can be found? No. This is about legacy. This is about protecting our name. There are things in this world that should never be uncovered. Some secrets are too dangerous to reveal. Isabel, who had been standing silently in the corner, spoke now, her voice trembling but firm. What are you afraid of, Father? What's in that treasure that would destroy everything? Why did you make Aunt Eveline disappear? Why didn't you want her to tell the world the truth? Lord Hawke's eyes flickered briefly, a momentary crack in his otherwise unshakable composure. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Poirot watched him, waiting for the final confession, the moment when the web of lies would finally collapse. You know the truth, Isabel, Lord Hawke said softly, his voice now filled with a strange mix of resignation and something darker, something like a curse. And now you understand why it must remain hidden. The treasure beneath this estate is not just gold or jewels. It is something much more dangerous. It's the power to control, to reshape everything. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could change the world. I had to protect it. Protect us all. The final reveal. Poirot stood still for a moment, his mind racing through the final pieces of the puzzle. The treasure beneath the estate, the legacy that had been hidden for centuries, was not just material wealth. It was something far more potent, something capable of altering the balance of power itself. But what was it? What was the true nature of this treasure that had driven Lord Hawke to such extremes? Poirot turned to Isabel, his voice soft but filled with clarity. The truth is within reach, Miss Hawke, but it is up to you to decide what happens next. Your father may have tried to protect the family, but in doing so, he has only fed the web of lies that has entangled everyone. The truth, however, is a powerful thing. It cannot be silenced forever. Lord Hawke's eyes flashed, but there was no anger now, only the unmistakable realization that Poirot had seen through it all. The web of lies was fraying, and the truth was no longer something he could control. Isabel, her hands trembling, took a deep breath. I never wanted any of this, she whispered, her voice breaking. But it's time. The truth has to come out. And with that, the final web of lies began to unravel. The room was heavy with silence, the weight of the moment pressing in on all of them. Poirot knew the mystery was nearly solved. The treasure beneath the Hawke estate, the necklace, and the family's dark secrets had all been brought into the light. But there was still one final question that needed answering. Would the truth set them free, or would it destroy them all? As the pieces of the puzzle locked into place, Poirot stood quietly, waiting for the final confession. The web of lies was shattered, but the consequences of the truth were yet to be revealed. Chapter 8. The Clue in the Garden. The night had grown late, and though the grand halls of the Hawke estate remained silent, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Poirot, ever the master of observation, had spent the evening weaving together the tangled web of lies and secrets that had enveloped the Hawke family. The pieces of the puzzle were nearly in place, but there was one final thread that still eluded him, one last clue that had yet to reveal itself. It was a moment of stillness, one of those rare instances when Poirot allowed his mind to settle, just for a moment. He stood at the window of his room, gazing out over the sprawling gardens of the estate, their beauty now almost ghostly in the pale moonlight. The trees, their branches heavy with the weight of years, cast long shadows that seemed to move like dark fingers across the lush lawns. The soft rustle of the wind through the leaves whispered like a distant secret, drawing Poirot's thoughts away from the mystery within the house to the mystery that lay just beyond its walls. A soft knock on the door broke his reverie. It was Isabelle. "May I speak with you, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Her expression, though composed, carried the weight of something more, something unresolved, like the tension of an impending storm. Poirot gestured for her to enter, his mind already turning. There was something more to Isabelle's presence now. She was no longer the frightened young woman caught in the web of her family's secrets. There was a resolve in her eyes, a flicker of something stronger than fear. She had made her choice. "You are troubled, Miss Hawke," Poirot said softly, his eyes steady. "You have seen the truth, and now you carry its burden." Isabelle hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I can't carry it alone anymore. I need to tell you everything. Everything I've kept hidden." She stepped further into the room, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. Poirot remained silent, his gaze fixed on her. He was patient, as always, allowing her the time to speak, to unravel the knot that had bound her for so long. "I know the truth about my family," Isabelle continued, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not just about the necklace or the treasure beneath the estate. It's something older, something darker. My father, he knew about Lady Eveline's discoveries, the treasure she had uncovered. But it wasn't just wealth she found. It was power, a power that could change everything. And my father, he couldn't let that happen." Poirot nodded, his mind absorbing every word. "And you, Miss Hawke? What role did you play in all this?" Isabelle took a deep breath. "I never wanted any of it. But when I found out the truth, when I learned about the treasure, I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't live in the shadow of my father's lies any longer." Poirot's gaze softened, but he did not speak. He knew that Isabelle was struggling with more than just the mystery of the necklace. She was grappling with the weight of her family's dark legacy. And now she had come to him, not as a victim, but as someone seeking redemption. "It's time," Isabelle whispered, almost to herself. "The secret must be revealed. The necklace, it's the key. And I believe I know where it's hidden." The garden Poirot listened carefully as Isabelle spoke, her words tumbling out in a rush. But it was when she mentioned the garden that Poirot's mind sharpened. The garden, the vast, overgrown ground surrounding the estate, had always seemed like an afterthought, a place to be admired from afar, but never fully explored. It had been dark when Poirot first arrived, and his attention had been focused entirely on the mystery inside the estate. Yet now, as Isabelle's words took shape, he realized that the garden might hold the final clue. "You believe the treasure is hidden in the garden?" Poirot asked, his voice steady, his thoughts already racing. Isabelle nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "I do. I think it's buried beneath the old oak tree in the far corner of the garden. Lady Eveline mentioned it in her letters. She said the necklace was just the first key to uncovering something far greater. I think my father knew this, and he tried to keep it hidden." Poirot stood, his mind clicking into place. "Then we must go at once, Miss Hawke. Time is of the essence. The night walk. The garden was silent when Poirot and Isabelle stepped outside, the air cool and crisp with the scent of the earth and leaves. The moon hung high above, casting long silvery beams across the manicured lawns and overgrown hedges. As they walked through the garden, the shadows of the trees seemed to stretch and shift as though they were moving with purpose. Poirot's steps were measured and deliberate, his eyes scanning the ground for any sign of the hidden treasure. Isabelle walked beside him, her face drawn in concentration, though there was a flicker of hope in her eyes, something she had not allowed herself to feel until now. They reached the far corner of the garden, where the ancient oak tree stood, its gnarled roots stretching deep into the earth. The tree was massive, its bark rough and twisted with age, and its branches reached out like skeletal arms against the dark sky. Poirot stepped closer to the base of the tree, his hands brushing the earth, his fingers searching for any irregularity. "Is it here?" Isabelle asked, her voice a breathless whisper. Poirot did not answer immediately. He was focused, his mind working through the possibilities. As he knelt by the tree, he noticed something odd, something that seemed out of place. The earth around the tree was disturbed, the soil freshly turned, as though someone had recently dug here, then hurriedly filled it back in. A slight smile curved Poirot's lips, and he turned to Isabelle. "The treasure, Miss Hawke, may be closer than we thought." He began to dig, his movements precise, his hands moving through the soil with the skill of someone who had uncovered many hidden secrets in his time. The sound of the earth being moved was soft at first, but as Poirot worked, the hole deepened, revealing the faint outline of something buried beneath the surface. Isabelle watched in silence, her breath caught in her throat. Finally, after several minutes, Poirot's hand struck something hard, something metallic. With a final push, he unearthed a small, ornate chest, its surface weathered by time but still intact. The chest was old, much older than anything Poirot had seen before, and it was covered in intricate carvings, symbols that he did not immediately recognize. Poirot carefully lifted the chest from the earth and placed it before Isabelle. He opened it slowly, as though the very act of unveiling its contents would bring forth a flood of revelations. Inside the chest was not gold or jewels, but a collection of ancient scrolls and papers. Poirot's fingers brushed over them delicately, his mind racing as he read the inscriptions on the topmost scroll. The words were written in a language he could not immediately identify, but the significance was clear. The treasure was not material wealth, but knowledge. Knowledge that could change everything. The final revelation. As Poirot turned the chest toward Isabelle, she gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. This is what my family has been protecting? Knowledge?" Poirot nodded, his eyes still scanning the papers. "Yes, Miss Hawke. Your family was not hiding a material treasure. They were protecting knowledge. Knowledge of something far more powerful than gold or jewels. This was the true legacy of the Hawke family." Isabelle's hands trembled as she reached out to touch the scrolls, her fingers brushing over the ancient paper. "What does it say, Poirot? What is this knowledge?" Poirot's gaze lifted from the chest, his eyes locking with Isabelle's. "It is a secret, Miss Hawke, a secret that has been buried for generations. And now, it is yours to protect. What you choose to do with it is entirely up to you." Isabelle stood silent for a moment, the weight of the revelation settling in. She had uncovered the final piece of the puzzle, yet as Poirot had said, the truth was now hers to decide. The power of the knowledge in that chest could change the course of history, but the responsibility to wield it was greater than anything she had imagined. The night stretched on, but the mystery was now at an end. The garden, once a place of mystery and shadows, had become the final stage in a journey that had brought Poirot and Isabelle face to face with the truth. The treasure had been found, but the true cost of that discovery was yet to be understood. And as Poirot walked beside Isabelle, the weight of their discovery heavy in the air, he knew that the story of the Hawke family and the secrets buried beneath the earth was finally coming to its conclusion. But the future, as always, was uncertain, and the choices made now would shape the path ahead. The garden had given up its final secret, and with it, the game was over. Chapter 9. The true culprit. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft, silvery light over the Hawke estate. The air, once thick with tension, had cooled with the passing hours. Yet within the walls of the mansion, the suspense had only grown. Every corner of the house seemed to pulse with unanswered questions, and Poirot, standing at the heart of it all, could feel the final moments of the mystery drawing near. The treasure had been found beneath the garden, hidden in an ancient chest, but the identity of the true culprit, the person who had stolen the necklace and driven this entire drama, still remained elusive. Poirot had pieced together the family's secrets, uncovered the treasure, and even learned of the legacy hidden beneath the Hawke name. But the one thing that remained was the person who had been behind the theft, the person who had woven the web of lies that had entrapped everyone. Now it was time for the final revelation. Gathering the players, Poirot stood in the center of the grand drawing room, his eyes scanning the faces of those who remained in the mansion: Lord Hawke, Isabelle, Lady Hawke, and Charles, the butler. Each of them had played their part in the tangled web that had ensnared the family, but one of them had crossed the line into outright deception. One of them had not just hidden the truth, but stolen it, literally and figuratively. With a calm but firm voice, Poirot addressed the room. "Mon ami, we are now at the end of this mystery. I have gathered all the pieces, and I trust you are ready to hear the truth. You have all played your part in this story, but there is one among you who has gone too far. There is one person here who has betrayed not only this family, but the very trust that binds it together." Lady Hawke shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of her glass. Lord Hawke, standing beside the fireplace, seemed distant, his face unreadable. Isabelle, though calmer than before, still looked pale, her eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Charles, the butler, remained standing near the door, his posture rigid, as if bracing himself for whatever would come next. Poirot continued, his voice measured, but filled with the weight of the moment. "It is clear now that the necklace was not just stolen for its value, but for what it represented. The true treasure, hidden for generations, was not material wealth, but knowledge. And that knowledge, my friends, was a secret that one of you could not allow to be revealed." The final piece of the puzzle, Poirot took a slow, deliberate step forward, his eyes moving from face to face as he spoke. "Lady Evelyn, your sister, discovered the truth. She uncovered the treasure and the legacy of your family, a legacy that, when revealed, would change everything. but she was silenced. And the necklace, the very symbol of your family's power, was hidden, not because it was valuable, but because it was dangerous. Lady Hawke's breath caught in her throat, her hand trembling as she reached for her glass. "What do you mean, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, though there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something dark, something guilty. Poirot paused, letting the silence hang in the air like a weight. "I mean, Madame, that you are the one who took the necklace," he said, his voice soft but cutting through the tension. "You were the one who stole it, who hid it, and who kept it from the world." Lady Hawke's face drained of color, her eyes wide with disbelief. No, that's impossible. I would never." Poirot's gaze was unwavering. "You see, Madame, it was not just the family's legacy you feared. It was the truth, the knowledge within those letters, within the treasure beneath this estate. That knowledge would have revealed everything about your family's past, and the lengths to which you have gone to protect it. You could not allow that truth to see the light of day." The confession Lady Hawke's lips trembled, and she took a hesitant step back, as if retreating into the shadows of her own guilt. The room was still, every breath held, every eye fixed on her. For a long moment she remained silent, and Poirot could feel the weight of the truth pressing against her. The walls of lies she had built up were crumbling, and there was no escape now. Finally, her voice broke the silence. Yes, it was me," she whispered, her voice thick with regret and fear. "I couldn't let it out. I couldn't let the truth destroy everything we've built. My sister, Lady Eveline, she knew too much. She was going to expose everything. The treasure, the legacy, the dark secrets of our family. I couldn't let that happen." Isabel's face fell, the revelation cutting through her like a knife. You killed her," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but the accusation hung in the air like a shadow. Lady Hawke's eyes closed, and for a brief moment, she seemed to shrink under the weight of Isabel's words. "I didn't kill her, not directly, but I knew what would happen. I knew that if I stopped her from revealing the truth, she would disappear, vanish like so many before her. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. The treasure had to stay hidden." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Lady Hawke's face. "And the necklace? The necklace was the key, not just to wealth, but to power, to the knowledge that could change everything. You couldn't allow anyone to discover what Lady Eveline had uncovered. So you took it. You hid it, hoping that the past would remain buried." The final twist. As Poirot spoke, the pieces of the story began to fall into place. The necklace had never been just a family heirloom. It had been the key to a hidden legacy. A legacy that could topple the power structure of the family, expose its darkest secrets, and alter the future of the Hawke name. Lady Eveline had discovered this treasure, and she had planned to reveal it. But her sister, driven by fear and greed, had stopped her. And the necklace, an object so simple yet so powerful, had become the symbol of that betrayal. But Poirot wasn't finished yet. There was still one more twist to the story, one more detail that needed to be uncovered. "You see, Madame," Poirot continued, his eyes glinting with the satisfaction of the final piece falling into place. "The necklace itself was not the true treasure. The treasure was the knowledge contained within those letters, the knowledge of your family's past, of what your ancestors had done to protect that power. And there was someone else who knew about it. Someone else who could have exposed the truth. Lady Hawke's eyes widened, her face pale. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. Poirot turned to Charles, the butler, who had remained silent throughout the revelation. "Charles," Poirot said, his voice cool but filled with finality, "you knew, didn't you? You knew the truth all along." Charles's eyes flickered, and for a moment it was as though the man's entire facade cracked. He stepped forward, his face a mixture of shame and guilt. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I knew about the treasure. I knew what Lady Eveline had uncovered, and I knew the lengths to which Lady Hawke would go to protect it. But I never thought it would end like this. I thought I could keep it hidden forever." Poirot's gaze shifted to Isabel, who stood silent, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "And you, Miss Hawke," Poirot said, his tone now soft but firm. "You were the one who discovered it, weren't you? You found the chest in the garden. The truth is now yours to protect or to reveal. The choice is yours." The resolution. The room was still, the weight of the final revelation hanging over everyone. The mystery had been solved. The true culprit, the true motives, and the deep secrets of the Hawke family had all been exposed. But now, the question remained. What would happen next? Lady Hawke, her face drained of color, turned away, her shoulders hunched with the weight of her confession. "I never wanted this. I never wanted any of it," she whispered. Isabel, her hands trembling, looked at Poirot. "What now?" Poirot's answer was simple but resolute. "Now, Miss Hawke, it is up to you. The truth is no longer yours to hide. You must decide what to do with it." As the family stood there, facing the truth they had so desperately tried to keep buried, Poirot knew that the final chapter of this case had come to an end. But the story of the Hawke family, its dark legacy, its secrets, and its future, was far from over. The truth had been revealed, and now it was up to those who remained to decide what would become of it. The web of lies had been shattered, but the consequences would ripple through the Hawke estate for years to come. Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. The air in the Hawke estate was thick with the silence of the storm that had passed. Silent, but not still. The walls, once full of whispers and laughter, now seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the final words that would draw the mystery to a close. Hercule Poirot stood in the heart of it all, his sharp eyes catching every movement, every shift in the room, as the Hawke family faced the truth they had long buried. Lady Hawke, Lord Hawke, Isabel, and Charles had all been exposed, their secrets, their lies, and their fears no longer able to hide in the shadows. But the ultimate question still remained. What would happen now? What would be the cost of the truth? And who would bear it? Poirot, ever calm, ever measured, had seen this moment coming from the start. The final pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, and now, with a quiet smile, he allowed himself the indulgence of a brief moment of satisfaction. The game was over, but the resolution was not one of simple triumph. It was more complex, more layered than that. The decision. The estate had returned to its stillness. The grand dining hall was empty now, save for Poirot and the remaining members of the Hawke family, each of them standing in a different corner of the room, lost in their thoughts. The air between them was thick with the weight of everything they had lost, and everything they could still lose. The secrets, once hidden beneath years of polished smiles and false pretenses, had been brought to light. And now, the truth was theirs to face. Poirot's voice broke the silence, steady and clear. Madame, Monsieur, and Miss Hawke, I trust you now understand the full extent of your family's secrets. The necklace, the treasure beneath the estate, the knowledge that had been hidden for generations. It was never about material wealth. It was about power, legacy, and ultimately control. Lady Hawke's eyes were fixed on the floor, her face drained of the calm composure she had so carefully cultivated for years. Her hands, clasped tightly in front of her, betrayed the anxiety that had taken root in her heart. The truth had already unraveled her, but now the choice was hers to make. Poirot continued, his voice soft, yet full of finality. The necklace, it seems, was not the only thing your family has kept hidden. The treasure beneath the estate, the letters, the knowledge, it is now a part of history. It cannot be buried again, nor should it be. Isabel's eyes flickered from Poirot to her parents. She had at last found her voice in the chaos of this revelation. What do we do now, Monsieur Poirot? She asked, her voice shaking but steady with newfound resolve. What happens to us? To our family? Poirot turned his gaze on Isabel, his expression unreadable. The choice is yours, Miss Hawke. You hold the key now, not only to the future of your family, but to the future of the legacy that has been buried for so long. You must decide whether the truth will set you free or whether it will shatter everything your family has built. Lady Hawke looked up, her face a mask of sorrow. But can we truly change anything now, Monsieur Poirot? Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. Can the truth undo what has been done? Poirot smiled softly, his eyes filled with understanding. Ah, madame, the truth does not undo the past. It only allows one to face it. You cannot change what has already happened, but you can choose how to move forward. The burden of knowledge. The room seemed to hold its breath as the weight of Poirot's words sank in. The Hawke family had been living with a lie for so long that the truth, once uncovered, seemed almost too heavy to bear. But now, the only choice left was how to carry it. Lord Hawke stood, his back straight and his hands clasped tightly in front of him. His eyes, however, were filled with a mix of resignation and something deeper, guilt perhaps. What would you have us do, Poirot? He asked, his voice low. You've exposed everything. We can't undo it. The truth is out. But what happens now? Can we move on from this? Poirot's gaze never wavered. Moving on, Monsieur Hawke, is not about forgetting what has been revealed. It is about accepting it and living with the consequences. You and your family must decide what kind of future you wish to build with the knowledge that has come to light. There was a long pause as each of them absorbed his words. The burden of their legacy, of their choices, seemed to hang in the air. But Poirot's presence, the calm certainty of his words, had brought them to the edge of clarity. They had lived in shadows for so long, but now they had to step into the light. The choice, Isabel, was the first to break the silence. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling but steady. I never wanted any of this, she said, looking directly at her parents. But now that I know the truth, I can't ignore it. I can't go on living with the lies. Lady Hawke's eyes softened with something that might have been regret, but it was too late for apologies. Isabel had made her decision. I don't know what the future holds for us, she continued, But I know that the secrets must end with me. The legacy, it's too much. It's not worth the cost. Lord Hawke nodded, his face etched with a mixture of sorrow and acceptance. You're right, Isabel, he said quietly. The weight of this legacy is too great. We've hidden too much. Perhaps it's time to let go. Poirot watched them closely, his eyes sharp, taking in every word, every gesture. He knew that the family was at a crossroads now, standing on the precipice of their future, uncertain, but no longer trapped by the past. And in that moment, Poirot understood. The true mystery had never been the necklace or the treasure beneath the estate. It had been the family's inability to confront their own history, to accept the consequences of their choices. A new beginning. The family stood together in the drawing room, the weight of their decision hanging in the air, like a breath held too long. But the tension was no longer one of fear. It was one of acceptance. They had faced the truth, and while the path ahead was uncertain, it was theirs to choose. Poirot turned to leave, his mind already turning to the next case, the next puzzle. But before he did, he stopped and turned back to Isabel. Miss Hawke, he said softly, you have the strength to move forward. You have faced the truth, and that is a rare thing. The rest of your family must follow your lead. Isabel nodded, her face resolute, though her eyes betrayed the storm that raged within her. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for helping us find the truth. Poirot gave her a slight bow, his usual smile playing at the corners of his lips. It is my pleasure, Miss Hawke. The truth, after all, is never simple, but once it is revealed, it sets everything in motion. What happens next is for you to decide. As Poirot left the drawing room and made his way toward the door, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The mystery had been solved, but the true resolution lay not in the treasure or the stolen necklace, but in the choices the Hawke family would now make. They had been freed from the past, but the future, like all futures, remained unwritten. With a final glance back at the Hawke family, Poirot stepped into the night. The truth had come to light, and with it, the dawning of a new chapter for them all. As he walked away from the mansion, his mind already turning to the next case, he knew that sometimes the greatest mystery of all was not the one solved with logic and reason, but the one that was resolved with a single choice. And with that, the story of the Hawke family came to an end. But for Poirot, the work was never done. There was always another mystery, another truth to uncover, just waiting for the little gray cells to discover it.